The fluorescent lights in the hallway of PS 114 always flickered on Thursdays. 8-year-old Maya Chen pressed her face against the small window of the music room door. Inside, she could see a black Yamaha piano sitting in the corner like a sleeping giant. It was October 2003, and for most kids, the music room was just a blur on their way to the playground. But for 3 weeks straight, Maya had stopped right here. Something about that piano pulled at her, even though she couldn't explain why. She'd never touched a piano. Her parents, Lynn and David, ran a laundromat on Roosevelt Avenue. The sounds of washing machines and the smell of detergent were the soundtrack of her childhood, not Mozart. They worked from morning till night, just to make ends meet. Music lessons weren't even on the radar. Survival was. But Maya couldn't stop staring through that window. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez had taught music at PS 114 for 12 years. She was used to kids rushing past her door. But one Thursday, she noticed something different. A small Chinese girl with crooked glasses, just standing there, watching. The next day, the girl was there again. And the day after that. On the fourth day, Mrs. Rodriguez opened the door. Maya jumped back, startled. "Do you want to come in?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, smiling warmly. Maya nodded, her heart pounding. "Come on," Mrs. Rodriguez said, holding the door wider. "The piano doesn't bite." Maya stepped inside. The room smelled like old books and wood polish. Posters of composers with powdered wigs lined the walls, but Maya only had eyes for the piano. She walked toward it slowly, afraid to touch it. "Go ahead," Mrs. Rodriguez encouraged. "Put your fingers on the keys." Maya's small hand trembled as she reached out. The keys were smooth and cool. She pressed down on middle C. The sound that came out was pure and clear, and she gasped softly. She pressed another key, then another. The notes were random, but to her, each one was magical. Something inside her had woken up. "Do you like music, Maya?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Maya nodded, her glasses sliding down her nose. "I like the songs on the radio, but I never heard piano like this before. It sounds like it's talking." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. This child had that special spark. "Would you like to learn how to play?" Maya's eyes went wide. "Can I?" Then Mrs. Rodriguez asked the question she had to ask. "Would your parents be able to pay for lessons?" The light in Maya's eyes dimmed. She looked down at her scuffed sneakers. "My parents work at the laundromat. We don't have extra money." Mrs. Rodriguez had guessed as much. She crouched down to Maya's eye level. "Tell you what if you came here during your lunch period? I could teach you then. No charge." Maya's head snapped up. "For real?" "For real," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "But you have to promise me something. You have to practice, and you have to take it seriously." "Deal?" Maya nodded so hard her glasses nearly fell off. "Deal." And that's how it started. Every day during lunch, while other kids played kickball, Maya sat at the Yamaha upright with Mrs. Rodriguez. They started with the basics. How to sit, how to curve her fingers, how to find middle C. But Maya was different. She wasn't just going through the motions. She came alive at that piano, absorbing everything like a sponge. If Mrs. Rodriguez showed her a scale once, Maya would practice it 20 times until she got it right. "You're a natural," Mrs. Rodriguez told her after just 2 weeks. "Have you been practicing at home?" Maya shook her head sadly. "We don't have a piano. I just practice in my head sometimes." Mrs. Rodriguez's heart broke a little. Here was this incredibly talented, dedicated child, and she couldn't even practice. That weekend, Mrs. Rodriguez went into her garage and dusted off an old Casio keyboard. It wasn't much, but it worked. On Monday, she brought it to school. When Maya saw it, her eyes filled with tears. "For me?" "For you," Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed. "Now you can practice at home." Maya hugged the keyboard like it was made of gold. That afternoon, she lugged it on the bus and all the way to the laundromat. It was heavy, and she had to stop twice to rest, but she didn't care. She was carrying not just a keyboard, but a dream. And this was only the beginning of her story. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next. In the heart of Queens, with the constant hum of dryers from the laundromat below, a 14-year-old girl named Maya carried a different kind of music in her heart. Her story begins not with a grand overture, but with a simple, slightly worn-out keyboard. It was a gift from her music teacher, Mr. Henderson, who saw a spark in her that she was just beginning to discover herself. She carefully carried it up the narrow stairs to their apartment, her excitement bubbling over like a forgotten pot on the stove. This keyboard wasn't just a collection of plastic keys. It was a promise, a doorway to a world she'd only ever dreamed of. When she unveiled it in their small living room, the reaction wasn't quite the symphony of joy she had hoped for. Her parents, practical and hardworking, saw not an instrument of dreams, but a potential distraction. Her father, his hands calloused from years of fixing machines, looked at the keyboard with a deep sigh. "Maya," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of long days and mounting bills. "What is this? We have no room for such things. No time for games." Her mother, though gentler, echoed his concern. "Music is a nice hobby, Mia, but school is what matters. Your future." They weren't being cruel. They were being protective. In their world, survival was the main melody, and dreams were a luxury they felt they couldn't afford for their daughter. The keyboard, in their eyes, was a dissonant chord in the carefully composed rhythm of their life, a life built on practicality and tangible results. Maya's heart sank, but a quiet defiance began to stir within her. That first night, the silence of the apartment felt heavy, charged with unspoken words. Maya waited until the rhythmic clanking of the last washing machine downstairs faded away, and the city's late-night murmur was the only sound left. Then she tiptoed to the living room. Placing a thick blanket over the keyboard to muffle the sound, she put on her headphones. Her fingers, hesitant at first, found the keys. The notes were clumsy, stumbling over each other, but to Maya, they were the most beautiful sounds in the world. This became her ritual. Every night, after her homework was done and her parents were asleep, she would enter her secret world of music. The melodies she practiced were her escape, her rebellion, her prayer. The cramped living room transformed into a grand concert hall, the city's distant sirens becoming a strange, urban orchestra accompanying her. She was learning to speak a new language, one that flowed not from her lips, but from her fingertips. Unbeknownst to Maya, she had a silent audience. Her grandmother, Abuela, who shared a room with her, would often lie awake, listening. She wouldn't say a word, but in the morning, Maya would find a small plate of cut mango or a warm cup of atol left on the kitchen counter, a quiet offering of support. Abuela had seen that same fire in her own youth, a passion for painting that had been extinguished by life's harsh realities. In Maya, she saw a chance for that flame to burn brightly. One morning, as Maya was putting her books in her bag, Abuela pressed a small, folded piece of paper into her hand. It was a drawing, a delicate sketch of a bird in mid-flight, its wings spread wide. "Para mi pajarito," she whispered, "for my little bird. Don't let them cage you." It was the first time anyone had truly acknowledged her dream, and it gave Maya the strength to practice not just with passion, but with purpose. Her late-night sessions became more focused, her fingers flying across the keys with growing confidence and grace. Months turned into a year, and the timid notes had blossomed into complex and beautiful sonatas. The keyboard was no longer just a gift. It was an extension of herself. Mr. Henderson was astonished by her progress. "Maya," he'd say after she played a particularly challenging piece, "your technique is improving, but what's truly remarkable is the feeling. You make the music breathe." It was he who first planted the seed of a grander dream in her mind. Juilliard. The name itself sounded like a myth, a legendary place for musical gods, not for a girl from a laundromat in Queens. But the more she researched it, the more the dream took root. She pictured herself on a grand stage, the warmth of the lights, the hush of the crowd, her music filling every corner of a magnificent hall. It was a bold, terrifying, and exhilarating vision. This was no longer just a hobby. It was a calling. Juilliard became her North Star, the fixed point she navigated by during her nightly musical voyages. The application forms felt like a secret treasure map, and she spent hours studying the requirements, her determination solidifying with every note she played. Her 15th birthday arrived, and the family gathered around the small dinner table. The air was thick with the aroma of her mother's cooking, and an undercurrent of tension. Her father, in a rare moment of celebration, raised his glass. To Maya, he toasted, to a bright future. We were talking, your mother and I. Maybe you could study business or accounting, something stable. You could help with the laundromat, make it something bigger one day. He smiled, genuinely believing he was offering her the world. But his words landed like stones in Maya's heart. A practical career, he emphasized. The words echoed her mother's earlier concerns, but now they felt like a final verdict. Papa, Maya began, her voice trembling slightly, I want to study music. I want to go to Juilliard. The silence that followed was deafening. Her father's smile vanished. Juilliard? He repeated, the name sounding foreign and absurd on his tongue. Maya, be realistic. We are not those kinds of people. Music doesn't pay the bills. It's a fantasy. The argument that erupted was a storm that had been brewing for months. Voices were raised, tears were shed. You don't understand. Maya cried, the frustration and hurt pouring out of her. This is who I am. Her father, his face a mask of disappointment, stood up. The discussion is over, he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. You will focus on your real studies. The birthday cake on the table remained uncut. A sweet promise turned bitter. The conflict wasn't just about a career choice. It was a clash of worlds, of generations, of the definition of a good life. For her parents, it was about security. For Maya, it was about her soul. That night, Maya didn't need to muffle the keyboard. The argument had left a gaping silence in the apartment that no blanket could cover. She sat down, her body aching with the sorrow of the fight. But when her fingers touched the keys, something shifted. She didn't play a piece from her lesson books. Instead, she let her emotions flow out, improvising a melody that was her own. It was a song filled with the day's pain, the sting of her father's words, the weight of her family's fears. But as she played, another feeling emerged, a current of unwavering resolve. The notes became stronger, more defiant. The music was her solace, her shield, her declaration of independence. Her father's words, meant to ground her, had instead given her wings. She knew the path to Juilliard would be steep and lonely, filled with obstacles far greater than her family's disapproval. But as the final notes of her raw, emotional composition faded into the Queen's night, Maya knew one thing for certain. They could try to silence her voice, but they could never silence her music. Her journey was just beginning. Thank you for watching. If Maya's story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that inspire. At school, things weren't any better. Newtown High School in Elmhurst was a big public school with 4,000 students. Maya wasn't popular, wasn't an athlete, wasn't part of any particular group. She ate lunch alone most days, did her homework in the library, and stayed invisible. The kids with money wore designer clothes and talked about their weekend trips to their parents' vacation homes. Maya wore the same rotation of 5 outfits from Target and had never left New York City. In April of her freshman year, she made an appointment with her guidance counselor, Mr. Peterson. His office smelled like old coffee and was decorated with motivational posters that said things like, "Reach for the stars," and "Your future starts today." Maya sat in the plastic chair across from his desk, her hands folded nervously in her lap. "So Maya," Mr. Peterson said, pulling up her file on his computer, "what can I help you with today? Picking classes for next year?" "Actually, I wanted to talk about college," Maya said. "Specifically, music school." Mr. Peterson nodded slowly, clicking through screens. "Okay, what schools are you thinking about?" "Juilliard." He stopped clicking, looked at her over his reading glasses. "Juilliard? The Juilliard school?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, which creaked loudly. "Maya, Juilliard is... Well, it's one of the most competitive music schools in the world. Do you have private instruction? A performance background?" "I've been learning piano for 6 years. Mrs. Rodriguez at my elementary school taught me, and I still take lessons with her sometimes. I practice every day." "Mrs. Rodriguez," he repeated, typing notes. "And have you attended any music camps, competitions, pre-college programs?" Maya shook her head, feeling smaller with each question. "I see." Mr. Peterson pulled up something else on his screen, probably her family's financial information. "Maya, I appreciate your ambition, but I want to be realistic with you. Schools like Juilliard typically accept students who've had years of intensive training, private tutors, access to resources that, he paused, choosing his words carefully, that students from your background don't usually have access to. But if I work really hard, it's not about working hard, he said, not unkindly. I'm sure you work very hard, but you be competing against kids who've been groomed for this since they were 4 years old. Kids with connections, resources, professional training. Have you considered maybe a state school? Queens College has a decent music program. You could live at home, keep costs down. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. So you're saying I shouldn't even try? I'm saying you should be realistic. Set yourself up for success, not disappointment. There are plenty of good schools that would be a better fit. He printed out a list and handed it to her. Take a look at these. And Maya, it's great that you love music, but make sure you have a backup plan. The arts are very competitive, and most people need a practical career to fall back on. She left his office with the paper crumpled in her fist and tears threatening to spill. In the bathroom, she threw the list in the trash, but Mr. Peterson's words haunted her. She started noticing things she'd been too naive to see before. In YouTube videos of young pianists, she saw their expensive instruments, their pristine practice studios, heard mentions of summer programs in Europe and private lessons with famous teachers. She'd thought talent was enough. She was starting to realize how wrong she'd been. In October of her sophomore year, Mrs. Rodriguez told her about an audition opportunity. The New York Youth Symphony was holding open calls for their chamber music program. It was a long shot, but Mrs. Rodriguez believed Maya was ready. This could be really good for you, Mrs. Rodriguez said. If you get in, it goes on your resume. It shows serious programs that you're serious about music. Maya practiced for 6 weeks straight. She chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor a dark, dramatic piece that she'd taught herself from watching videos online. She practiced it until she could play it in her sleep, until her fingers moved across the keys automatically, until every crescendo and diminuendo was burned into her muscle memory. The audition was held at a church in Manhattan on a Saturday in November. Maya took 3 trains to get there, arriving an hour early because she was terrified of being late. The waiting room was filled with other teenagers, all of them looking confident and polished. They carried professional-looking cases for their instruments. They talked casually about their teachers from Manhattan School of Music, about summer programs at Tanglewood, about competitions they'd won. Maya sat in the corner in her best dress, a simple navy blue one from H&M that her mother had bought on sale, and tried not to feel like an imposter. When her turn came, she walked into the audition room on shaking legs. 3 judges sat behind a long table, their faces neutral and professional. The piano was a beautiful Steinway Grand, the nicest instrument Maya had ever touched. Whenever you're ready, one of the judges said. Maya sat down, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The piece poured out of her, all the longing, all the frustration, all the hope she'd been carrying. She played it perfectly, or as perfectly as someone with her training could. When she finished, her heart was pounding and her hands were trembling. Thank you, the judges said. We'll be in touch. 3 weeks later, the letter came. Thin envelope. She knew before opening it what it would say. We regret to inform you that we are unable to offer you a position in this year's program. We received applications from many qualified candidates. The worst part was the feedback form included at the bottom. One judge had written, technically adequate, but lacks proper training and refinement. Would benefit from professional instruction before auditioning for elite programs. Maya read that line over and over. Technically adequate, lacks proper training. It felt like a confirmation of everything Mr. Peterson had said, everything her father had implied. She wasn't good enough. She'd never be good enough. The gap between her and the kids who got into these programs wasn't just about talent. It was about money, access, opportunity, a whole world she'd been born outside of. That night, she sat at her keyboard with her headphones on and cried while she played. Her grandmother shuffled over and put a wrinkled hand on her shoulder, not saying anything, just being there. Maya wanted to give up. She wanted to listen to her father, to Mr. Peterson, to that judge who dismissed her as technically adequate. She wanted to stop hurting, stop hoping, stop wanting something that seemed designed to be out of her reach. But the next morning, she woke up and went to the laundromat. She helped her parents with the weekend rush, folding sheets and ringing up customers. During her lunch break, she went to the back office, put on her headphones, and practiced scales on her keyboard. Because here's what she was beginning to understand. Wanting something impossible doesn't make you foolish. It makes you brave. And sometimes, the only thing you can do is keep going, keep practicing, keep hoping, even when the whole world is telling you to stop. She was 16 years old, and Juilliard still felt a million miles away. But her hands knew the keys, and her heart knew the music, and somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Not yet, but maybe someday." So she practiced, and she waited. And she didn't give up. The rejection letter from the Governor S. School for the Arts arrived in February of Maya's junior year. She de-applied hoping for their summer intensive program, 6 weeks of serious training that could have transformed her application prospects. The letter was polite and brief. They'd had over 800 applicants for 50 spots. She wasn't one of them. Maya added it to the growing stack in her desk drawer. Rejections from the Aspen Music Festival, from the Boston University Tanglewood Institute, from the Interlochen Arts Camp. Every single one cited the same things: limited slots, highly competitive pool, strong candidates. The laundromat was struggling. 2 new competitors had opened within 6 blocks, both with newer equipment and longer hours. Her father looked older these days, his face deeply lined with worry. Maya spent her afternoons after school at Chen's family laundry, as the faded sign out front announced. She'd fold clothes while watching YouTube videos of professional pianists on her phone, earbuds tucked in so her mother wouldn't tell her to focus on work. She'd watch their fingers fly across the keys, see the concert halls they performed in, read the comments praising their interpretations of pieces Maya had also learned. The difference was that those pianists had gone to the right schools, studied with the right teachers, had opportunities Maya couldn't even dream of accessing. Between loads of laundry, she'd prop her music theory book against the detergent bottles on the folding table. She was teaching herself harmony and composition from a textbook she'd found at the library. While her hands folded someone's bedsheets, her mind worked through chord progressions and voice leading. Her mother noticed. "Maya, you're humming again. Customer can hear you. Sorry, Ma. And your hands, look at your hands." Maya looked down. Her fingers were red and rough from the hot water and detergent. The skin was cracking near her knuckles. She'd been so focused on practicing that she hadn't noticed how much the laundry work was affecting her hands. For a pianist, hands were everything. "I'll use more lotion," Maya said quietly. Her mother sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion and something else maybe regret. "This piano thing, Maya, your father and I, we worry. You spend so much time on music, but what future does it have? We need you to be practical." Maya wanted to scream. She wanted to say that music wasn't a hobby she could just turn off like a light switch. It was part of who she was, as essential as breathing. But she'd had this conversation a dozen times, and it always ended the same way. So she just nodded and went back to folding. That evening, after the laundromat closed at 9, Maya climbed the stairs to their apartment and sat at her keyboard. She needed to practice for at least 2 hours to make up for the time she'd lost, but her hands hurt. She rubbed lotion into them, wincing at the stinging in her cracked knuckles, then put on her headphones and started her scales. C major, G major, D major. The patterns were so familiar now that her fingers could execute them while her mind wandered. She thought about the kids in those summer programs she'd been rejected from. Right now, they were probably practicing on grand pianos in climate-controlled studios. They had teachers monitoring their technique, adjusting their posture, correcting every small mistake. Maya had YouTube videos and Mrs. Rodriguez's once-a-month check-ins when their schedules aligned. Frustrated, she ripped off her headphones and put her head in her hands. Her grandmother, P. Po, looked up from her knitting. "Memwai, memwai." she said softly, using Maya's childhood nickname. "Why you cry?" "I'm not crying, Peepo. Your heart is crying." "I can see." Maya looked at her grandmother, this tiny woman who'd survived poverty in rural China, who'd raised 4 children on almost nothing, who'd immigrated in her 60s to help her son. Cannot read girls don't need reading. Cannot have opinion girls don't need opinions. Cannot dream girls don't need dreams. But you know what? I did anyway. And look, I am still here. That's different, Peepo. No different. World always tells you what you cannot do. You decide what you will do anyway. Maya hugged her grandmother, breathing in her familiar scent of tiger balm and jasmine tea. Have you ever felt like you've lost that spark for something you once loved? That feeling when the very thing that brought you joy suddenly becomes a source of anxiety and self-doubt. Today, I want to share a story with you. A story about a young pianist named Maya and her journey back to the music she almost left behind. Maya's fingers first danced across the piano keys when she was just 5 years old. It wasn't a chore. It was a conversation. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was her best friend, her confidant. She'd spend hours lost in the melodies of Chopin and Debussy, her small room filled with sounds that were larger than life. Her parents, amazed by her natural talent, soon found her a renowned teacher, Madame Dubois. Under Madame Dubois's strict but caring guidance, Maya blossomed. Her technique was flawless, her musicality profound. By the time she was a teenager, everyone who heard her play agreed. Maya was a prodigy, destined for the grand stages of the world. Competitions became her life. She collected trophies and accolades, like other kids collected stickers. Each victory was a confirmation of her talent, a step closer to the dream. But with every win, the pressure mounted. The joy of playing slowly began to be replaced by the fear of not being perfect. The weight of expectation from her parents, her teacher, and even herself started to feel less like a gentle push and more like a heavy burden. The turning point came at the prestigious National Youth Concerto Competition. This was the big one, the competition that could launch her career. Maya had prepared tirelessly, practicing a notoriously difficult Rachmaninoff concerto, until her fingers were sore and her mind was numb. She walked onto the massive stage, the spotlight blinding, the silence of the audience deafening. She sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The opening notes were perfect, powerful, and filled with emotion. But then it happened. A tiny slip, a single wrong note. It was a mistake most in the audience wouldn't even notice. But to Maya, it was a colossal failure. Her mind went blank. Her fingers, which had always known exactly where to go, suddenly felt like foreign objects. She fumbled through the rest of the piece, her heart pounding with shame and panic. The applause at the end felt hollow, a courtesy rather than a celebration. She didn't win. She didn't even place. The rejection was devastating. It wasn't just about losing a competition. It felt like a rejection of her very being. The girl who was the piano prodigy had failed. The criticism from the judges, though constructive, echoed in her head as brutal condemnations. She went home that night and closed the lid of her piano. For the first time in her life, the thought of touching the keys filled her with dread. The days turned into weeks. The piano in the living room gathered a thin layer of dust. Her parents and Madame Dubois tried to encourage her, but their words felt empty. They didn't understand. The music, which had been her sanctuary, was now a haunted house, filled with the ghosts of her failure. Maya started avoiding music altogether. She'd change the station if a classical piece came on the radio. She'd make excuses to avoid going to concerts. She felt lost, a ship without a rudder, drifting in a sea of silence. She told herself she was done with music, that she would find a new path, a normal life, free from the crushing weight of expectation. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, Maya stumbled upon a box of her grandfather's old belongings. He had been an amateur jazz musician, a man who played the saxophone not for fame or applause, but for the sheer love of it. Inside the box, she found his old vinyl records. There were albums by Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and, most intriguingly, a pianist she'd never heard of, Bill Evans. Curious, she brought the old record player downstairs and put on a record titled Waltz for Debbie. As the needle dropped, a sound filled the room that was unlike anything she had ever focused on before. It was jazz. It was fluid, spontaneous, and beautifully imperfect. The harmonies were complex, yet soulful. The rhythm was playful, inviting. It wasn't about hitting every note perfectly. It was about the feeling, the conversation between the musicians. Bill Evans's playing, in particular, captivated her. It was introspective, gentle, and incredibly expressive. He wasn't showing off. He was sharing a piece of his soul. For the first time in months, Maya felt a flicker, a tiny, warm ember in the cold ashes of her passion. She listened to the entire album, and another and another. She was mesmerized by the freedom of jazz, the way it embraced improvisation and personal expression over rigid perfection. This was a different world of music, one that didn't seem to care about competitions or flawless execution. It was about connection, emotion, and the beauty of the moment. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Maya quietly crept downstairs. She lifted the dusty piano lid. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished black surface. Her hands were trembling slightly as she rested them on the keys. She didn't try to play Rachmaninoff or Chopin. Instead, she just let her fingers wander. She tried to mimic some of the jazz chords she had heard, experimenting with new sounds and rhythms. It was clumsy at first, awkward, but it was also liberating. There was no judge, no audience, no pressure. It was just her and the piano, having a new kind of conversation. Slowly, day by day, Maya began her journey back to music, but on her own terms. She dove headfirst into the world of jazz. She bought books on jazz theory, listened to countless records, and spent hours at the piano, not practicing scales, but exploring. She was learning to improvise, to create music in the moment. It was a completely different skill set. It required her to listen, to react, to trust her instincts. It was scary, but also exhilarating. She wasn't just recreating someone else's music anymore. She was creating her own. She started visiting a small, local jazz club, a place with dim lighting and a warm, intimate atmosphere. She'd sit in a corner, nursing a single drink for hours, just listening to the house band. She saw musicians who were not flawless, but they were authentic. They made mistakes, but they just smile and play on, incorporating the unexpected notes into their solos. They were having fun. The joy was palpable. One night, the club's regular pianist was sick. The band leader, a friendly old bassist named Leo, had seen Maya at the club week after week. He walked over to her table and asked, "Hey, I've seen you here a lot. You play?" Maya's heart leaped into her throat. She wanted to say no, to shrink back into her corner. But then she looked at the small, slightly out-of-tune upright piano on the stage. It wasn't a grand concert piano. It was just an instrument waiting to be played. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. Stepping onto that small stage felt more terrifying than walking into the national competition. This time, there was no sheet music, no prepared piece. It was just her. Leo called out a simple blues tune. Maya closed her eyes, remembered the soulful playing of Bill Evans, and the pure joy of her own recent explorations. She started to play. Her classical training gave her a solid foundation, but it was her newfound love for jazz that gave her a voice. She didn't just play the chords, she embellished them. She responded to the bassist's lines and the drummer's rhythm. She took a solo, hesitant at first, but then gaining confidence. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She was just trying to be herself. When the song ended, the small crowd erupted in genuine, heartfelt applause. It wasn't the polite applause of a concert hall. It was warm, appreciative, and real. Leo gave her a big grin and a thumbs up. For the first time in a very long time, Maya smiled a real, unforced smile. That night was the beginning of a new chapter for Maya. She started playing at the jazz club regularly. She discovered that her passion for music hadn't died. It had just transformed. She still loved classical music, but now she approached it with a new perspective, one that valued expression over perfection. She even started composing her own music, a unique blend of classical harmony and jazz improvisation. She realized that failure wasn't the end. It was a redirection. The rejection at the competition had forced her to step off the path that was laid out for her and find her own. It allowed her to break free from the cage of being a prodigy and discover the joy of being a musician. Maya's story is a powerful reminder for all of us. Sometimes we get so focused on a single definition of success that we lose sight of why we started in the first place. Rejection and self-doubt are not signs that we should give up. Often, they are opportunities to reassess, to explore new avenues, and to rediscover our passion in a more authentic and personal way. Whether it's music, art, a career, or a relationship, it's okay to change your tune. The most beautiful melodies are often the ones we compose ourselves after the original score has been torn. Thank you so much for watching and for letting me share Maya's story with you. If you've ever felt a similar struggle, I hope this brought you a little bit of encouragement. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that inspire. See you in the next video. In every high school, there's always that one person, the quiet one, the one who seems to blend into the background, lost in the sea of loud voices and big personalities. At Northwood High, that person was Maya Chen, a 17-year-old girl with eyes that held a universe of thoughts, but whose voice was rarely heard above a whisper. Her world was one of 88 keys, a silent language where she could truly speak. Tonight was the annual school talent show. The air in the auditorium was electric, buzzing with the chaotic energy of teenagers. Backstage was a blur of flashy costumes, nervous laughter, and last-minute rehearsals. Dancers stretched, a garage band tuned their guitars, and a comedian nervously paced, muttering punchlines to himself. And then there was Maya. She sat alone in a corner, her hands resting in her lap, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the glitter and glam around her. She wasn't nervous, not really. The stage was just another room. The audience just shadows. The only thing that mattered was the grand piano waiting for her under the spotlight. Her turn was announced. Next up, Maya Chen with a piano solo. A smattering of polite, almost indifferent, applause rippled through the crowd. As she walked towards the stage, whispers followed her. Maya? The quiet girl from a P-Chem? A piano solo? How boring. Probably Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The comments were like tiny paper cuts, small but stinging. Her classmates saw her as invisible, a wallflower. They had no idea about the fire she held within, the passion that burned brightest when her fingers touched the ivory keys. She sat down at the piano, the polished wood cool beneath her fingertips. For a moment, she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath and shutting out the noise, the whispers, the expectations. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for herself, for the girl who found solace in sonatas and friendship in fugues. Then she began. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated into the air. They were delicate, ethereal, like moonbeams dancing on water. The initial chatter in the auditorium started to fade. A few heads turned, curious. The melody wasn't flashy or loud. It was something far more powerful. It was honest. As Maya played, she was no longer just Maya Chen, the quiet girl. She was a storyteller. Each note was a word, each chord a sentence. The music painted a picture of a moonlit night, of quiet reflection, of a deep and profound beauty that often goes unnoticed. Her fingers moved with a grace and confidence that no one in that room had ever seen from her. The music swelled, rising and falling like a gentle tide, full of emotion, longing, and a quiet strength. The auditorium fell completely silent. The only sound was the piano. The jocks in the back row who had been scrolling through their phones now looked up. Their expressions softened. The popular girls who had been whispering stopped, their eyes fixed on the stage. Even the teachers, who had seen countless talent shows, leaned forward, captivated. They weren't just hearing music. They were feeling it. They were feeling Maya's lifetime of quiet observation, her moments of joy, her hidden sorrows, all poured into the melody. The final notes of Clair de Lune hung in the air, fragile and perfect, before fading into absolute silence. For a long moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire auditorium was holding its breath, suspended in the magic she had created. Then, one person started to clap. It was followed by another and another, until the entire room, erupted into a thunderous standing ovation. It wasn't polite applause anymore. It was a roar of genuine admiration and surprise. As Maya stood up and gave a small, shy bow, she looked out at the sea of faces. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. They saw her. They truly saw her. The smiles, the cheers, the respect in their eyes. It was more than she had ever expected. That night, Maya Chen didn't win a trophy or a prize. She won something far more valuable. She won recognition, not for being the loudest or the most popular, but for being herself. She showed everyone that sometimes the quietest voices have the most beautiful things to say. Her performance was a reminder that there is incredible strength in vulnerability, and that music has the power to connect us all, breaking down walls and revealing the hidden depths within each of us. Maya walked off the stage, her heart full, leaving behind a silenced crowd and the lingering echo of moonlight. She was still the quiet girl, but now everyone knew she had a voice that could move the world. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time. They felt the loneliness in the quiet passages. They felt the hope in the rising crescendos. They felt the bittersweet beauty of wanting something so badly it hurts. Every teenager in that room knew what it was like to want something impossible. And Maya's playing somehow gave voice to that universal ache. Her hands moved across the keys with a fluidity that came from 10 years of devotion. The melody sang out over the auditorium, each note clear and purposeful. She played the middle section, the part where the piece grows more urgent, more insistent, with a passion that made people lean forward in their seats. Then it softened again, returning to that original gentle theme, like the moon coming out from behind clouds, like hope returning after despair. Maya could feel tears on her cheeks, but she didn't stop playing. She played through the emotions, letting them fuel the music rather than distract from it. Because this performance wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about truth, about showing up as exactly who she was, a girl from Queens with rough hands and a cheap keyboard and a dream that everyone said was impossible. The final notes hung in the air, fading slowly like the last rays of sunset. Maya's hands lifted from the keys. She sat perfectly still, letting the silence settle. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The auditorium was frozen in a moment of collective breath-holding. Then it shattered. The applause started somewhere in the middle rows and spread like wildfire. Within seconds, people were on their feet. The standing ovation rolled through the auditorium in waves. Students, teachers, parents, everyone. The noise was deafening after the profound silence of Maya's performance. Maya looked up, stunned. She saw students with tears streaming down their faces. She saw the popular kids who'd never spoken to her standing and clapping. She saw teachers looking shocked. And in the third row, she saw her grandmother on her feet, both hands pressed to her heart, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. Her parents stood beside Po, both of them clapping. Her father's face, that tired, worried face, was transformed by something Maya had rarely seen there: pride. The applause went on and on. Maya stood up, gave a small bow, and walked off stage in a daze. Backstage, the other performers stared at her. The girl who'd been scheduled to sing after her just shook her head in disbelief. How am I supposed to follow that? But Maya barely heard her. She was trying to process what had just happened. She'd walked onto that stage as nobody. 5 minutes later, she was, what? Still herself. Still Maya Chen from the laundromat. But somehow different. Somehow seen. Mrs. Rodriguez found her backstage and pulled her into a fierce hug. I told you, she whispered. I told you they'd listen. The rest of the talent show continued, but nobody could focus on it. In the lobby afterward, students Maya had never spoken to came up to her. That was incredible. I didn't know we had someone that talented at our school. Where did you learn to play like that? Can I take a picture with you? One girl, Jessica Torres, captain of the cheerleading squad, someone from a completely different social stratosphere, grabbed Maya's hands. That made me cry, she said simply. I don't even like classical music, but that was beautiful. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again, and again. She pulled it out and saw Instagram notifications flooding in. Someone had recorded her performance and posted it. Already, it was being shared and reshared. The views were climbing. 100, 500, 1,000. By the time Maya got home that night, the video had 10,000 views. By Sunday morning, it had hit 50,000. People were commenting from all over New York, California, other countries. Music teachers were sharing it. Professional musicians were commenting on it. The story was spreading. Talented teenager from Queens taught herself piano, performed at her school talent show. On Monday morning, Maya woke up to an email that made her heart stop. The subject line read, Juilliard Pre-College Division Audition Request. She opened it with shaking hands. Dear Ms. Chen, we recently became aware of your performance at Newtown High School through social media. We were impressed by your musicality and emotional depth. While our regular admission cycle has passed, we would like to invite you to audition for a potential spot in our program. Additionally, depending on your financial circumstances, scholarship opportunities may be available. Maya read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then she ran to her grandmother's room, where Pee-po was already awake, doing her morning Tai Chi stretches. Pee-po, look. Her grandmother couldn't read English well, but she saw Maya's face and understood. She pulled her granddaughter into a hug, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. That morning, Maya walked into school and everything was different. Not because she was different. She was still the same girl, with the rough hands and the cheap clothes. But because she'd finally shown people who she really was. And they'd listened. The moon doesn't shine by trying to be the sun. It shines by being exactly what it is, something quiet and persistent and beautiful in its own way. Maya had finally learned to shine. Maya's Juilliard audition took place on a cold January morning in 2012, 3 months after that talent show performance. She rode the subway from Queens to Lincoln Center, her keyboard in a rolling case beside her, wearing the same navy dress that was starting to feel like her uniform. Her mother had wanted to come with her, but someone needed to watch the laundromat. So Maya made the journey alone, her acceptance letter folded carefully in her coat pocket like a talisman. The Juilliard building was everything she'd imagined, and more. Marble floors, high ceilings, students walking past with instrument cases that probably cost more than her family's monthly rent. She felt small and out of place, but she wasn't the same girl who Dee felt that way at the Youth Symphony audition years ago. She'd learned something important. Belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about showing up as yourself and trusting that's enough. She played 3 pieces for the panel. They asked her questions about her training, her background. When she told them she'd learned primarily from YouTube videos and a retired elementary school teacher, one of the judges looked surprised. Not dismissive surprised. Your musicality is quite developed for someone with your training background, she said. It was the first time anyone at that level had acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, there were different paths to the same destination. 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Full scholarship. They wanted her to start in the fall. Her father cried when she told him, actual tears running down his weathered face as he stood in the laundromat surrounded by washing machines. I was wrong, he said in Mandarin. I thought I was protecting you, but you were braver than me. Maya started at Juilliard in September 2012. She was 18 years old, and nothing had prepared her for how hard it would be. The other students were phenomenally talented. Many of them had been training at elite music schools since they were children. They talked casually about performances at Carnegie Hall, summer programs in Vienna, master classes with famous pianists whose names Maya had only read in books. The first semester nearly broke her. She struggled with music theory because her self-taught foundation had gaps. Her technique needed refinement. Years of practicing on a cheap keyboard had created habits that had to be unlearned. In studio classes, she'd play something she thought was good, and her professor would point out a dozen things that needed improvement. But there was one thing Maya had that many of her classmates didn't. She remembered why she was there. Some of the students at Juilliard had been pushed into music by ambitious parents. They were technically brilliant, but emotionally disconnected from what they played. Maya had fought too hard to get there to take it for granted. Every practice session, every lesson, every performance mattered to her in a way that went beyond grades or career prospects. Her professor, Dr. Steinberg, noticed this. One day after a particularly difficult lesson where Maya had struggled with a Liszt etude, he asked her to stay behind. "You know what makes a great pianist, Maya?" he asked. She expected him to talk about technique or theory. Instead, he said, "It's not about playing every note perfectly. It's about making people feel something. And you already know how to do that. Everything else is just refinement." Maya graduated from Juilliard in 2016. She was 22 years old, and the music world was starting to pay attention. Not because she was the most technically perfect pianist out there. There were plenty of those. But because when Maya played, something happened. Audiences leaned forward. Critics used words like authentic and emotionally resonant. She was getting invitations to perform at respectable venues, building a reputation slowly but steadily. Her first major performance at Carnegie Hall came in 2019 when she was 25. It was part of a showcase for emerging artists, and she played a program of Chopin, Debussy, and a contemporary piece by a living composer. The New York Times review the next day said, "Maya Chen plays with a directness and honesty that cuts through the pretension often found in classical performance." Here is an artist with something to say, but the performance Maya thinks about most didn't happen at Carnegie Hall or any prestigious venue. It happened 2 years later, in 2021, when she started a program she called Keys to Dreams. The idea was simple: free piano lessons for kids from low-income families in Queens and the Bronx. Maya rented space at community centers, brought in donated keyboards, and taught group classes on weekends. She remembered being that 8-year-old girl staring through the window of a music room, and she wanted to open doors for other kids like her. On the first Saturday of the program, 15 kids showed up. Some came with their parents. Others came alone, having seen flyers posted around their neighborhoods. They ranged in age from 7 to 14. Most had never touched a piano before. Maya looked at those kids, their nervous faces, their too big or too small clothes, their eyes full of curiosity and hope, and saw herself. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, about that moment when one person's belief had changed everything. "Okay," she said, smiling at the group. "Who wants to learn how to play?" Every hand shot up. Maya taught them the same way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her. Patient, encouraging, making it fun while still being serious about the music. She showed them where middle C was. She taught them simple melodies. And she told them stories about her own journey, the rejections, the struggles, the moment when she almost gave up. Music isn't just for rich kids or people who start when they're 3 years old, she told them. Music is for anyone who feels something and wants to express it. That's you. That's all of you. One of her first students was a 10-year-old girl named Destiny Martinez. She came from a single-parent home in the Bronx. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Destiny was quiet, almost painfully shy, and she'd fold into herself when other kids were loud or confident. But when Destiny sat at the piano, something changed. Her whole body relaxed. Her face lit up. Within 3 months, she was practicing every chance she got at the community center before class. During lunch at school, anywhere she could find a piano. Maya saw the same fire in Destiny that Mrs. Rodriguez must have seen in her. So she did what Mrs. Rodriguez had done. She gave Destiny a keyboard to take home. She stayed after class to give her extra instruction. She believed in her when Destiny didn't believe in herself. Have you ever walked past a place and just known something special was happening inside? In the heart of Queens, New York, tucked away in a bustling neighborhood, there's a laundromat. But this isn't just any laundromat. If you listen closely, past the rhythmic hum of the washing machines, you'll hear something magical, the sound of a violin. This is the story of Maya, a musician who turned a laundromat into a concert hall and a dream into a reality. Maya grew up with a violin in her hands and a melody in her heart, thanks to her grandmother, P. Po. P. Po was her first teacher, her biggest inspiration. She didn't just teach Maya how to play notes. She taught her that music was a language of the soul, a force that could connect people and heal communities. P. Po always said, "Music belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford a fancy hall." This lesson became the guiding principle of Maya's life. After finishing her studies at a prestigious conservatory, Maya could have pursued a glamorous career, playing in the world's most famous orchestras. But she felt a different calling. She looked around her own community in Queens and saw so much raw talent, so many kids with a fire in their eyes, but with no access to music education. The cost of instruments, lessons, and sheet music created a barrier that was just too high for many families. Maya remembered her grandmother's words and knew what she had to do. She didn't have a studio or a concert hall. What she had was her family's laundromat. It was a place where people from all walks of life gathered, a true community hub. So, she pushed aside some washing machines, set up a few folding chairs, and put up a simple sign, "Free violin lessons." At first, people were confused. Violins at a laundromat? It seemed strange. But slowly, curiosity won. One of the first to peek in was a young girl named Destiny. Destiny was shy, often hiding behind her mother's legs, but her eyes were wide with wonder as she watched Maya play. She had never seen a violin up close before. Maya smiled and offered it to her. The moment Destiny held that instrument, something clicked. It was like she had found a missing piece of herself. Destiny became Maya's first student. Their lessons were unconventional. The steady rhythm of the dryers became their metronome. The scent of clean laundry filled the air instead of rosin and old wood. Amidst the spinning clothes and the chatter of neighbors, Destiny learned to make music. She was a natural. The shy girl who barely spoke began to express herself through soaring melodies and powerful bow strokes. Soon, other children joined. The laundromat transformed. It was no longer just a place for chores. It was a sanctuary of sound. Kids would do their homework on top of washing machines while waiting for their turn to play. Parents, initially just there to do laundry, would stay to listen, their faces breaking into proud smiles as their children played their first scales. The Laundromat Orchestra was born. Maya's mission was about more than just teaching music. It was about building confidence, fostering discipline, and creating a safe space where kids could dream. She taught them that their background didn't define their future. She showed them that beauty could be found anywhere, even between a spin cycle and a final rinse. She sourced old instruments, repaired them herself, and gave them to students who couldn't afford their own. The community rallied around her, donating what they could: a little money, a music stand, or just their time and encouragement. The story of the Laundromat Orchestra started to spread. A local news reporter heard about it and came to do a story. The segment went viral. People from all over the world were touched by Maya's dedication and the children's passion. Donations poured in, not just money, but instruments, music books, and offers of help from other musicians. One of those offers came from an unexpected place, the administration of Carnegie Hall. They had seen the news story and were deeply moved. They invited Maya and her Laundromat Orchestra to perform on the most prestigious stage in the world. The news was overwhelming. Carnegie Hall, for them? The kids were ecstatic, but also terrified. This was the big league. The pressure was immense. Destiny, who was now the orchestra's lead violinist, felt it most of all. The girl who once hid behind her mother was now supposed to lead her friends onto a stage where legends had played. Doubt began to creep in. Seeing her students' fear, Maya thought of Pipo. She gathered the kids and told them stories of her grandmother, of how music was never about perfection, but about heart. "Don't think about the fancy seats or the important people," she said. "Think about why you started. Think about the joy you feel when you play. Close your eyes and imagine you're back in the laundromat. Play for yourselves, for each other, for your families. Just share your story." The night of the concert arrived. Backstage at Carnegie Hall, the kids were a bundle of nerves, their small hands clutching their instruments. The grand hall was a world away from the familiar hum of the laundromat. Maya took a deep breath and looked at them. She saw Destiny, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. She squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this," she whispered. P-Po would be so proud. As they walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the massive audience. The kids took their places, their faces illuminated by the bright stage lights. Maya raised her bow. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then she gave the downbeat. The first note, played by Destiny, was clear and pure. It soared through the hall, filled with all the hope, struggle, and joy of their journey. It was the sound of a dream taking flight. They played with a passion that silenced every skeptic. They weren't just playing notes on a page. They were telling their story. The story of a laundromat in Queens, of a grandmother's legacy, and of a teacher who believed that music could change the world. When the final note faded, the hall was silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause erupted. It was thunderous, a wave of appreciation and emotion that washed over the stage. The audience was on its feet, tears in their eyes. They weren't just clapping for the music. They were clapping for the incredible journey that brought these kids from a laundromat to this legendary stage. Maya's story teaches us that our stage can be anywhere: a classroom, a kitchen, a garage, or even a laundromat. True impact isn't about the grandeur of the venue, but the size of the heart you bring to your work. Maya didn't just teach music. She taught resilience, community, and the belief that every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserves a chance to create something beautiful. Her grandmother's legacy lived on, not just in Maya, but in every child who picked up an instrument in that Queen's laundromat. Thank you so much for watching. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that celebrates the power of community and dreams. We'll see you in the next one.